Everyone, it's Charlene Lee, and today I am very excited to be talking about convergence. And so, what I mean by convergence is like, what the heck is that? Because people are asking, well, we have digital transformation, we got convergence. And earlier this year, I did a report for Autodesk, and the report really looked at what is convergence, and in particular, what is the relationship between that and digital transformation. So, I wanted to talk about that today because it is such an important topic because we oftentimes think to ourselves, well, convergence is important, but in many ways it's become a buzzword. So, what I'd love to hear from you all today is this. Uh, First of all, if you want to share where you're coming from, but also share how you think about convergence or that you don't at all, that until I brought this topic forward, you were thinking, well, why would I care about convergence at all? So today, this is what I want to talk about. I have some slides, happy to share those with you. And in particular, I would love to talk about why it's important in the context of digital transformation. Now, last week, you will remember that I had my dear colleague, Omar Akhtar, join to talk about the latest report we put out from Altimeter about the state of digital transformation. And he found in his report that there were these leaders, people who were being very successful in digital transformation. And then there are people who are lagging. And there are different factors, and I'll call them the X factors of things like being focused on employee engagement. That was a key differentiator. Being focused on growth and innovation, having a centralized coordinating office with digital transformation, and very importantly, having the CEO leading the effort. It's seen that digital transformation is strategic. So if you like to see that, that was in last week's live stream. But today I want to talk about convergence. And this report was really interesting because we found a direct correlation with people's connection to digital transformation and their maturity and what type of convergence they were really focused on. But first, what I'd like to share is a quote from somebody from one of the executives who will remain anonymous. And this really characterized, I think, in many ways, how people think about convergence today. So this is the quote. I would never use the term convergence, he said, in my daily interaction with the business or my IT organization. I can have that conversation with CIOs, but not with old school IT professionals and leaders. They look at me skeptically because they're like, okay, what is this fluffy stuff of convergence? I'm like, what the heck is convergence? So I wanted to talk about that today because when we think about convergence, I really do think about it as a couple different things, but in particular, it's the merging and blending of what were previously separate streams of processes, of data and technology, even of industries, to be able to create new experiences, products, and services. So, what couldn't exist before are now being created because of these breaking down of barriers, breaking down of silos inside of organizations, but increasingly across industry too as well. So it's a highly creative space. And what I really liked about this report is that we really try to look at and see what were the types of convergence that were really making a difference. So one of the things that we found is that depending on the maturity level of an organization, convergence was becoming more important and part of their dialogue. So this is another slide that I want to show some data that show that if you had higher maturity stages, you were much more likely to say that convergence was going to be something that was going to highly influence my business in the future. So 59% of people at stage 5, which is the highest level of maturity, thought that convergence was going to be really important. And stage 5 are organizations that have gone through the heavy lifting of digital transformation. They've gone through making sure that departments are digitized, have worked on integrating them across platforms, and are now really focused on optimizing. And what I like about convergence, and especially given the state of digital transformation, is that we're nearing the end of this transformation. Again, some people may be starting, but for many companies, we're nearing the end of this heavy lift. So what's on the other side? And I do believe it's convergence. These are the goodies. These are the things that now you can do to create new growth opportunities, to really transform your business into something new. So, I want to talk a little bit today about convergence and, in particular, why it's such an important thing for us to understand. Because if you truly are going to converge, then what we're going to find is that this is the payoff for digital transformation. And the research that we found really looked at how you could maybe get some of the benefits of convergence earlier in your digital transformation process. You don't have to necessarily wait until the very end to be able to reap those benefits. So I'd like to show you just a few things here. Let's see. Oh, first of all, I have Randy. Let's show Randy's comment here because he's answering my question about what is convergence to you. What does it mean? And he says the new paradigm currently emerging is far beyond most perceptions of what is converging. This is convergence of earning and activity for stakeholders in a given ecosystem with easy interoperability with other ecosystems. Randy, you are so on point. And we're going to talk about this, especially in the concepts of ecosystems across industries. So thank you, Randy, for sharing that. I love how you're saying that this is actually coming together, especially in the world of ecosystems. And then here's Jay chiming in. Jay, great to see you. So my thoughts is how you combine traditional services with the technology delivery that is convergence in my mindset. So absolutely, Jay. We're going to talk about that very example right now. So, what I want to do is share with you the four types of convergence that we found. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that you can see it a bit better. So, these are kind of the type of things that we have found to be so interesting. First of all, there's process convergence. And this is when discrete processes inside of an organization may be coming together. And the key reason to do this, frankly, is to drive more efficiency, both in the operations and also cost improvements. And some examples of this would be e-commerce really coming together with digital marketing. Historically, these two entities inside of organizations would be in two different parts of the organization. But as these processes have come together, it's very clear that there's a tremendous amount of overlap. So these two departments are coming together more and more. And if you're in the design and manufacturing space, then you also are seeing that design and manufacturing used to sit in completely different parts, and design would take their design and throw it over to manufacturing. Now, these two processes of designing new products, designing the manufacturing, really sit side by side. And it's an organic process now to really design the manufacturing at the same time they're making the products for feasibility and cost efficiency purposes. So those are two simple but very powerful examples of process coming together. And what we're finding is that process convergence is something that people at the earliest stages of digital transformation are really focused on, because that's where the biggest gains you can get. So if you're really just in the first two stages of digital transformation early on, focusing on process convergence is a fantastic way to dip your toe into convergence. Then we have technology convergence, and this is what Jay was talking about. When you're taking all these new technologies like cloud and IoT or supply chain technologies, AR and VR, and merging them together into the business. And so the key thing here again is around improving efficiency and reducing costs. But it's also a secondary benefit, and the reason why people are pursuing this is to drive innovation. And some key examples of this are like simple things like the smartwatches and devices. You're taking something that was an old technology and you're putting some connected technologies into that to make it do more than just tell you the time. It'll read your messages, it'll tell you how many steps it took, and so on. Things like the Apple Watch and Fitbit are great examples of this. And then you also have platforms inside the organization, like email marketing. And that has that space, you just use a platform to some software to be able to do your email marketing. As we've seen some of these amazing platforms like Marketo or again, even things like what I use, ConvertKit, are merging into marketing platforms. Now you can manage your social media, you can manage landing pages, you can manage so many different things that traditionally were just email marketing. So the emergence of these technology platforms are incredibly powerful, but they also require a significant upfront investment. And that is a major reason why, again, technology convergence is a little bit later on in digital maturity, because you need to have proven that all the advantages of earlier stages of your digital transformation is working so that you can justify this higher level of investment in these convergent technology platforms. Then you move into data convergence, and this is where previously siloed data is coming together into a data lake, data warehouse, but you're able to take advantages of all this data now being organized in a certain way, and you're making the investment now to merge that data across different parts of the organization. And a key benefit here is to be able to not just do efficiencies about cost, but also to create new customer experiences to enable better customer engagement. And some of the examples many of us have Pelotons out there. You may have seen these. And it was a merging of hardware along with the content, like classes and the coaches, the music that was coming in and understanding what kind of music people wanted. And then, of course, the community. These were different places that would normally have lived in different parts of the experience. And now it's on one place in that hardware and converged into that experience. And then we also have the examples of product design, where products now, in the past, you would have a little laboratory that designers would go in there and design things. Now they're reaching to different parts of the organization. They're getting information from marketing and research, consumer research into user interface experience testing, what's working, looking at data surveys coming in from marketing, and they may tap into real-time data of how customers and consumers are using the existing products today to be able to shape what they do in the design labs. And doing this report, saw from designers that like our world is completely different now. We used to just think about the product and the design, but now we have to take into account so many new data sources. They actually have data scientists now sitting in design labs and do product design groups to be able to crunch all that data for the designers. And then we have industry convergence. This is again what we were talking about before with Randy. And the idea is that these discrete industries are not coming together to create completely new and different experiences. And what's interesting here, this is coming back into the benefit of improving the customer experience, but in particular, creating completely new ones that couldn't have existed before. Some examples of that are Shanghai and Disneyland, where the creative collaboration that happened was across multiple industries. And in the past, if they wanted to create a new experience at an amusement park, somebody would design the sketches and then somebody else would go do something. And it was a very linear process. But in creating Shanghai Disneyland, it was a much more collaborative, all hands on deck, reducing the time, but also coming up with brand new ideas that wouldn't have been possible in the past from all of these industry collaborators. Another example are smart cities like Busan in South Korea. They're actually putting sensors into the water quality, into the roads to understand air quality, to understand what's really happening in the city so they can monitor and anticipate if things are going awry, preparing for disasters, for example. But they're also putting sensors into the huge port that they have to monitor the shipping traffic so they can use all of that data to give it back to the businesses that may be able to use it to be able to make their own decisions and create more converged opportunities. And I think one of my favorite examples is electric vehicles. If you have one of the new cars that are coming out, you know that one of the biggest issues is range anxiety. How far can I go before I can find a place to charge my car? So we're finding that car companies and manufacturers are working with utilities, are working with governments to be able to come up with a solution that can the emergence of these electronic vehicles. So that's a quick way to be thinking about what's happening with convergence. And I just want to go back and check and see if we have any other comments. All right, so here we go. You're coming from Jay. We have two quick comments from him. Convergence is the new power. A carry to Harry Timms, power and influence comes from the outside in or from the bottom up. And again, I love that book, Jay, The New Power. And Harry Timms, again, one of my favorite books that talks about where power is coming from. And you're right, convergence is actually creating new opportunities for these power shifts to happen. And if you're familiar with my work, when power shifts are happening, that's where disruption is happening. So, in many ways, the reason why I'm kind of so excited about convergence is that new forms and types of convergence are coming because of the creation of these platforms, the creation of these ecosystems. And Jay also says we need to understand is that this also challenges hierarchies, the way that industries and organizations have been constructed. All right, just a few more slides here that I want to go through. And by the way, if you haven't seen it already, you can get the slides at charlenelee.com/convergence slash at the end. So it's charlenelee.com/convergence. This is where you can download these slides. All right, last two slides that I want to share. The first one is really showing where those benefits of convergence are showing up by stage of digital maturity. So you can see, again, at stage 0, if you haven't started, there's no impact of convergence, but at stage 1 and 2, that's where the process convergence is really coming true and coming through. Stage 3, 4, and 5 is when technology convergence is really becoming preeminent. Not quite ready for data convergence until stage 4, and then stage 5, that's where industry convergence is really coming to bear. There is significant survey data behind this. We surveyed over 600 companies all around the world, and what we saw was that the benefits and the technologies, everything were really peaking at these different stages of digital transformation. That said, I think it's really important to start even back in stages 1 and 2 and anticipate that you're going to be going through these types of convergence as you mature digitally. And the reason why that's important is that you know what you can potentially do in the future. You can create these new experiences, create these new products and services, and do that right from the very beginning. So you're laying the foundations to be able to do that in the future. What we're finding is some of these organizations, especially at the very early stages, are already thinking about when they get to stage 5, what are they going to be able to do? And all the steps along the way that they have to take around process and data and technology to be able to get that yummy goodness of true convergence at the end. So, what should you do about this? What can you actually do? So, I have a couple quick thoughts around this. Well, first of all, culture is so important because, as I've always talked about, culture is the thing that makes the engine run when you're trying to go through transformations and disruptions. And so, how strong is your culture to be able to take on these changes? Especially even at the beginning stages when you're looking at process convergence. You're taking two teams that historically have never worked together, and you're going to mash them together and say, work in new and different ways to get the efficiencies we want. Culture needs to be there, create the scaffolding for these new ways of working. So I think it's so important to be able to think about culture as one of the key steps of how you would support it. And Jay absolutely agrees. Culture is always at the top of my list for driving change. Couldn't agree more. Designing for convergence, really key part two as well. You've heard me talk about the role of designers. And we think of designers as this very rare breed. They sit in this quiet room and they're creating beautiful things. And they have to be ready to be able to take all this data, use all this technology. So the training and the thinking and the skills, the capabilities of designers need to be right there imbued in those people who are creating these new ideas. But it's also putting design back into the organization so that we're thinking about design as integrated into the work that we do every single day. So, design thinking, thinking about the problems, taking design into account as we're going through our day-to-day operations is a key part to making conversions work because I guarantee you it's going to come a lot faster than you ever thought. And then we think about data for the machine learning that needs to be there. We know that data is a key part. So, are we creating and collecting the best, cleanest, truest data that we can? And this is in particular very important for artificial intelligence and machine learning because it builds on the data that you first put into it. I mean, you need to make a special effort to make sure that it's free of bias, that we understand any ways that it could be tilted or slanted to one direction versus another. And then finally, we need to hire for the right skills. How do we find people who can think in a convergent way? People who can think outside of the box, as we were talking about earlier, things outside of the box, because in this new converged world, we have the capabilities now because we've gone through digital transformation to create new ways of thinking. So, hiring people and then training them in cross functional areas, moving people around so they can see and experience what working in different departments are. That you're not just dependent on people at the very top of the hierarchies, but people throughout the organization truly understanding how the customer thinks and can think from the perspective of that customer, of that future customer, across all the different silos that exist, not only in our organizations but also out in industry. So those all right. My connection here is terrible today, so lost me there for a little while. But I want to say that Jay has another great comment here that design is an instantiation of values, cultures, and mores. So that's so true because what you show up with and create in your design is reflected on where you're starting from. So thank you so much for that, Jay. And Mario has this great comment that's the stage four is similar to the outward direction of digital transformation stages, where a company and the employees and the customers are interfacing around all the different ways around this. And again, stage four, from the alternative way of thinking about digital maturity, is exactly that. Stage four is when you're moving from just departmental, single departments into this integrated way of thinking about how you're offering things to the customer. And that's oftentimes when those digital transformation efforts are showing up in the customer experience of new products and experiences. And what we found is the inter-industry part, they may begin at stage four, but because you're so focused on making sure these platforms just talk to each other, just think about the legacy platforms that are there, that it's really difficult to focus on the industry. And one thing that was very interesting in talking to the people who were engaging in industry already is that they were looking at how do I connect with another organization? Where are they in their digital transformation? And so what you need to do is find people who at or similar stages or at least capabilities in transferring that data back and forth between the companies, between the industries to be able to make this work. So it's really a convergence of highly mature, digitally transformed companies where that industry convergence is happening. Because before then, you're still working on the back end of all of this to just get the foundations in place. So that's what I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this. There's a lot of data and information that I threw at you. Just a couple key things. I do want to just share that I do have a new podcast out. New episodes come out every Thursday, but you can go and get the first four episodes now. It's called The New Rules of Disruption. You can search on that. You can search on my name, and you will find this podcast. Again, I'm laying the foundations for how do you lead differently? Do we need to change our leadership? And just I poured all of my knowledge into these 10 episodes to talk about the 10 rules of how to lead change and disruptive change. All right. Next week, I'm going to continue this focus on digital transformation by looking at what is it that customer centricity is really about. And I've been working on some research with Profit and Altimeter that talks about what do we get wrong about customer centricity and what is it that we need to be doing differently? Because we all talk about being customer centric, but the vast majority of companies are falling short of that goal, and we'll diagnose why that is the case. So tune in next week for those questions and just I look forward to sharing some great examples with you too as well. All right, so that's what I have for today. I really, again, want to thank you for all the great comments and questions that you all had, because this live stream just wouldn't be the same. It would just be me talking and spewing about convergence and digital transformation. So thank you, everyone, for all of your great comments, and I will see you next week. Take care.